So, I finished platinuming this series on PSN. I decided to do these rankings before Sky, which would require me buying the Sky trilogy, because fuck me, why isn't Sky on PSN? And around when Reverie comes out to hype up the new Trails game coming out July 7th. Trails into Reverie, side tangent, while I actually prefer the localized English name, I gotta ask how they went from Hajimari to Reverie. And also Secretly Nayata, which comes out in September, which is also ironically the same month I've got to file my candidacy for US House of Representatives. This is a random side tangent, by the way, with no bearing, but it's just done as an explanation as to how brutal my paycheck goes away from like July to October. So here's how this video is going to be structured. I will use a basic outline of rankings for the video of where every video game in Crossbell and Cold Steel ranks for me. Before that, I'll make a quick preamble of my feelings towards the Kiseki Trail series, and when done in order, it will be structured as follows. My personal feelings towards the series overall, the outlined rankings of each game from worst to best, the retrospective of it as summarized as possible for decent runtime as to why I place them where I do, while I go into detail with each game, its general strengths, weaknesses, and for Cold Steel 3 and 4, borderline insane asylum levels of thirst for our glorious Princess Queen Muse Egret. No, really. She is the perfect woman and I want her to be mine. Slow down one, man. Kiseki Trails as a series, for me, is not just a tale of a vast world with incredible character writing and absurd world building and world-altering and sometimes world-breaking end twists. It's not just my thirst for Muse, my hatred for Millium, my incredible experiences with its visual presentation, its incredible soundtrack that may be unrivaled. It's not just the amazing, tight unit of lovable goofs like the special support section, not just the ludicrously intricate mechanics, and I could list more ad nauseum infinitum. Sure, those phenomenal traits are all huge facets of why I love it, but there's an unknown X element that I must let you know about. It's a renaissance and a rebirth for me. For a long time now, I've often played games that I either loved but was not blown away by, such as Like a Dragon, which sometimes gave me what I looked for in their games, but not always the wonder of stories like Kiwami, Kiwami 2, Zero, or Like a Dragon 7, or are a long-running series that once gave me wonder and joy that eventually denigrated into bitter cynicism, such as Hyperdimension Neptunia. When I say it's a renaissance and rebirth, not only is it so with my YouTube, but my sense of childlike wonder, like I had with Neptunia V2, was reborn and revitalized. I felt like that young adult one man who could actually feel things for a game series. But what Trails did that was unprecedented was that it did so, and did it consistently. Even ones like Cold Steel 3 and From Zero, which are by a country mile comparatively, my least two favorite games in the series so far, still were absurdly stimulating. Sure, building up to From Zero's main world-altering twist was agonizing, but once I saw it set up and hit the ground, it hit the ground running like they were trying to run away from paradise as fast as possible. Yes, that was a Kiseki reference. Yes, it was apropos. Yes, it was intentional. Were it not for the slog at the beginning, I may have put it much higher. The consistent level of overstimulation this series provides is second to none. It was so valuable to me that I even tried out Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus before finding out it's a shitty ARPG. That was how much goodwill Kiseki and Trails brought to me. It made me want to try out other games outside of my comfort zone somewhat, because it was made by Falcom and because it made me feel alive like I hadn't been feeling for over half a decade. And the best part is, despite only completing Crossbell and Cold Steel, my journey is far from done. Once July hits, I have Reverie and the Sky Trilogy to look forward to 100%ing. So, post-edit one man here. This script is already outdated. I've already 100%ed Reverie, but that's beside the point. I am going to continue Trails in the Sky, whether it's through unofficial upload videos like non-live streams that are, in case Sky for some reason cannot be 100%ed due to internet issues. And after that, I'm going to be ranking them all afterwards, and I hope to see you there. But for now, back to regular old... I'll do videos eventually on games like Reverie, my thoughts on the Sky Trilogy, the inevitable video on Nayuta I'll be doing, and a full rankings video once all mentioned content is done. Yes, this first rankings video is a work in progress, but I felt like I hadn't been uploading enough rankings videos. There are a couple of Kiseki and Falcon vids I want to make before Reverie, but I intend to also do a few tier lists as a form of making up for my failure to upload consistent content in my Cold Steel journey. I'm not a video editor by any stretch, and paying for editors is also something I cannot consistently do, and as a consequence of both, most of my old projects on this series are now outdated and are trash in their production value. Not like I had that much to begin with. In the end, I would rather make what I'm inspired by, rather than a consistent quota, which, in my personal opinion, lacks sincerity. Ultimately, the most faithful respect I can give this series is when I make videos in passion, to match the level of passion made in the Kiseki series. Of all the things that are said to be defining traits, despite what I'm about to define it as is simplistic, maybe even a bit reductio ad absurdum, but its ethos is quite simplistic in the best way possible. Kiseki is defined by its level of passion. Every pore, every facet is done with an absurd level of passion and dedication that no other companies can match up to. Through all the worlds, side quests, character interactions, and so on, every facet bleeds and screams, I love making this. And I scream back, I love this wonderful thing you have all made. With my full feelings out in the open, I feel like it is now a perfect opportunity to transfer to the rating structure from worst to best. So the rating structure from worst to best is as follows: Cold Steel 3, From Zero, Cold Steel 1, Trails to Azure, Cold Steel 4, and then Cold Steel 2. Also of note, ladies and gentlemen, Reverie is going to be the preliminary ranking as second to Trails of Cold Steel 2, just so you know. Fun factoid. That's the first part of the basic outline. If you were to structure the brackets of where sets of games would be ranked overall, Cold Steel 3 and From Zero would be in their own bracket near the bottom. Cold Steel 1 would dominate a singular bracket in a mid-category, distinct from the other two brackets. Then To Azure, Cold Steel 4, and Cold Steel 2 being clustered together at the top. I also chose to lower Trails to Azure below Cold Steel 4 again, for simple reasons I'll list later down the line. But for now, it's retrospective time for said rating, Cold Steel 3. A lot of this game is set up, 4-4. It harbors similar issues as From Zero in relation to Trails to Azure, but executed far poorer than From Zero. First thing of note, Cold Steel 3 has some severe hiccups with implementing a new engine. It seems to me that Falcom tends to do pieces of their work in twos. This is something consistent from the start in differing ways. Sky, first and second, are about the right family. Sky, third, and Reverie are more overworld epilogue. Cold Steel 1 and 2 are the arcs centered around the triumvirate dynamic between Crow, Reen, and Osborne. Cold Steel 3 and 4 are centered around Leaves and Reen and Crossbell. To Azure is a follow-up, to From Zero, and has its own issues with retcons and foundational problems, but I'm getting ahead of myself. One strength of the new engine provided by Cold Steel 3 is that the cutscenes are now entirely optional. You hate a cutscene and don't want to be there any further and or are a speedrunner, R2 is your best friend. But man, one of the roughest parts is establishing the start of a new cast. People like to say that the new Class 7 is better than the old one. By the way, from here on out, spoilers are going to be present, so be warned ahead of time. Feel free to skip the rest of this video if you are sensitive to any form of spoilers for Crossbell and Cold Steel. The reason I agree is for the most literal of interpretation. The reason why Class 7, the new one, is better is because they're smaller. It's infinitely easier to deal in units of 4 or 5 compared to the astronomically larger Class 7 of old, So of course, new Class 7 is, better. Or at least in theory, because while I objectively agree that new Class 7 is better, subjectively, I actually like the old Class 7 better. Oh boy, that's an argument that I'll get into. with Cold Steel 1. So, new Class 7 is Muse, Reen as an instructor, Yuna, Ash, Altina, and Kurt. Honestly, aside from Kurt, who's as dry as a saltine, I tend to like this group better, but the problem Cold Steel 3 has is that we get the bare bones of each character and what drives them forward. Yuna's arc is her absurd obsession with the special support section, which is endearing at first, until you realize that a large portion of her fangirling comes at the cost of her ability to appreciate the efforts Reen as a teacher is giving to her. I'm not expecting her to do anything special, just not be hostile, but her general culture shock with Reen versus the special support section can be aggravating to deal with in real time. Also, I love this weird mindset that this is supposed to be meta commentary on those who complained about Cold Steel 1 and 2 and how people often considered Cold Steel 1 and 2 inferior to the Crossbell arc. Which, in case you didn't figure it out yet, which you obviously would have figured it out, is that I do not agree with such a sentiment. But the more I think on it, the more my presumption of it being meta commentary is increasingly likely. Particularly how somewhere down the line, there's probably my favorite part of Yuna's and Reen's development. No, it's not what you're thinking, it's not the romance part, but rather the part where Reen cut down to the deepest part of Yuna's ethos, Yuna's soul, and it's my favorite interaction between the two, where he calls out Yuna, asking her whether she just wants to watch her heroes of the SSS or become someone as heroic as them. It's my favorite part of their dynamic. Not sure if this particular moment is in 3 or 4, but the fact that we get animosity from Yuna, then it somehow in 4 gets retconned to fell in love because of gratefulness, just makes it all the more frustrating, since it was always a shock for Yuna that made her so aggravating in 3. Yeah, I do love her jellybean personality in 4. Actually appreciated her as a deuteragonist in 4. Found out her cute crush on Reen in 4. But notice something consistent about my like and appreciation for Yuna's character as a pattern? It all happens in 4. I dare to say that the only characters that have no change in quality in the sequel is Muse and Altina. Both of them take on new roles in 4, but in 3 they are severely limited in what they are, and seeing most of their growth happen in 4 makes me feel disappointed we didn't get more of that dynamic in 3. It's slow, it's plotting, and Leaves does not excite me like the previous Thor's Campus. Another thing that bothers me is that in 3, we don't even get Muse and Ash yet, even though the opening sequence of the game has all these characters, making it feel like false advertising at first. Another strength of 3 is that many of the NPCs and support characters that didn't have voice lines at first are now voiced, so I'll give credit for that. Another weakness, however, is the soundtrack. Not only are most of the good tracks for the game from other games in the series, Here's Looking at You, Unfathomed Force, but the few good boss themes in 3 that are wholly original have no leitmotif significance like other Trails games I've played. Firm strength for Arios, the various tracks of Joachim Gunther, various versions of the Enforcer's theme, Majestic Roar, Great Power in Cold Steel 1 and 2. There are tracks associated with these various characters. Hell, even Unfathomed Force, despite being overused in the endgame with 2 Azure, at least could be cognitively associated as a leitmotif for Dami Mommy Waifu, Aryan Rod / Liane Sandlot. The main track I complain about in 3 is known as Step Ahead. As a solitary track, I absolutely love it when I'm not being spammed of it. But 3 spammed of it so badly that even my dreams and nightmares often use the theme as backdrop music. As a boss track in the game, I utterly hated it. It was slazy, it was sloppy, it was half-hearted, and it didn't have any conveyed meaning or association. Some people say it's an Ouroboros theme. My response is, okay, but I have 2 whole questions. Firstly, why is the Enforcer theme not good enough? Secondly, Why does it also appear on secondary fights that have zero WIP of Ouroboros? Like with a boss battle between your party versus Victor Arcade and Principal Aurelia. Part of what makes a lot of boss tracks and boss thematic leitmotif tracks is that they're recognizable, memorable themes you can point to, talk about, and remember fondly. Or in cases like Joachim Gunther and Azur Demiurgos, recalling horror with their nightmare boss fights. Hell, I remember far more fondly about Trails to Azur's Dark Throne, and the raw, brutal, and the most personally relatable speeches imaginable from Arios. I'll get there in a bit with Trails to Azur, but to bring it all home to some extent, a lot of these Cold Steel 3 games have tracks distinct and memorable for their own reasons. Songs like in Cold Steel 3, however, number in far less quantities and far less distinct. Don't get me wrong with these harsh criticisms. It still does a lot right, and it still engages me, but this game for me is the weakest of the series I've played by a country mile. But Cold Steel 3 still has fun galore, new worlds to explore, introduces characters like Muse and Ash, expand on the ideas around Altina and the meaning of emotions with Altina as a lens. There's still plenty of meat to bite into. Trails from Zero. Man, this is one unlucky game for me. Part of what made me feel like it was slow in plotting was that it had to follow up after Cold Steel 4. I played Cold Steel in order, then Crossbell in order. It took me a long time to acclimate and see it for what it is. And I did so right in time for Chapter 4 and its main twists. You figured out Joachim Gunther was the villain from the Dudley Call. I figured out he was the villain when he made a lore dump about the DG cult that only he could possibly know within the confines of From Zero. We are not the same. Memes aside, the twist was super obvious when he started talking about a cult when the cast just wanted a drug analysis. Like, the guy threw that out of nowhere. Not that it's a bad twist, since the twist was clearly done for a force of presence. He was clearly flexing, and it brought out a scene with Tio that was heartbreak. The traumas, the dynamics between Lloyd, Ellie, and Tio and Randy set their dynamic as a mature themed friend bond. The traumas, the dynamics between Lloyd, Ellie, Tio, and Randy set their dynamic as a mature themed friend bond that, while apples to class 7's oranges, still were moments that had me tearing up as well. And I think what made Tio's traumas feel even worse was how deeply Randy seemed to sell it. Like, give credit to Randy's voice actor, but he really sold his lines like the voice actor himself experienced it personally. Of course, Trails to Azur expands on that, but chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Trails from Zero really set an oppressive vibe. Like, the walls are collapsing, the doors are closing, and the hills and walls have eyes named the DG Cult remnants. Also, one slight extra positive, I love the Nightmare Mode boss fights in Crossbell. They were far more challenging than Cold Steel. But now we get into the negative. Firstly, Trails to Azur is worthless without From Zero. It exists as a jumping off point for Trails to Azur, and no, it's not just built in a way to make a positive foundation. Part of the problem I have with these two games is that the other part of the platform in regards to the Crossbell art is that some of the aspects of Trails to Azur can only exist while retconning what was built. Like, am I supposed to believe Joachim Gunther was the pawn of the freaking IBC while the main crew was sheltered there? That's some Alex Jones level shit right there. Or that Arios is part of a group that manipulates the cult. When he comes to our rescue, there are just some things in From Zero that are changed by the relationship between From Zero and Trails to Azur, from symbiotic to straight up parasitic. The idea that every plot point from Trails to Azur means something entirely different than what's established is somehow insulting to Trails from Zero players, like stuff involving Arios, or how the DG cult's purpose is as a puppet is basically somehow for the sake of over-glorified nationalism by alchemists from the Dark Ages, and is fucking ridiculous as it sounds. But also simultaneously rewarding for playing Trails from Zero. Like how the opening scene you see from Trails from Zero is more than just a mere preview of the later part of the game, and turns out to be an actual alternate timeline. It is a paradoxic head scratcher that makes me feel conflicted. Its pacing is a bit short, and the twists and incentives to finish the story is a bit iffy. Trails from Zero is a game worth your time, effort, and love, but it's not worth the love in Trails to Azure, where it basically tells you that you're a fool for playing Trails from Zero, since To Azure's entire plot mechanism and structure is validated by a massive act of gaslighting, saying your entire From Zero playthrough is just us doing exactly as the Cross family intended, and the Cross family only intended to use it for the sake of crushing Ereboni and Calvar. If you experienced both games, yet feel like Trails from Zero was rendered meaningless, don't worry, I feel for you, because for a long time that was how I felt while experiencing Trails to Azure for the first time. But if you treat From Zero in a game in isolation, it's still an enjoyable experience, if only it weren't for the fact that structurally, the pacing is extremely slow. The Crossbell arc's biggest highlight, surprisingly, is one people do not give credit for. It is something disturbingly subtle. Its mechanics. Notably what it does with the quartz and master quartz in Trails to Azure. It takes the intricate nature of it in Cold Steel and injects the living piss of it with Red Gnosis. The customization aspects and differing kinds of arts you can generate from it is an underrated facet and highlight of these two games, and we need more games in depth of it. What kicks it so long is its down the rankings is its relationship with Trails to Azure. Both are great games in isolation, but the relationship between the two is parasitic, and Trails from Zero takes the brunt of the damage. Now we move on to what's probably my second most contentious choice in placement, Trails of Cold Steel. This is contentious solely because Reen is divisive as a protagonist. People like to claim he's a Gary Stu, Mary Sue, yet also complain about him being too OP and having too many chosen one attributes. And to that I say, well, they're right, but at the same time miss the entire point and scope of Reen's character. He's not supposed to be normal. Spoilers for Cold Steel 4, but you can't be normal when you're basically, essentially, a possessed, moving, and speaking zombie. He's technically been dead for years, and yet we don't find this out until later. Reen is not indicative of author inserts or tropes or anything like that. Think of Reen as an empty shell who is shaped by other people just like any other human being. We are all a product of the people around us, the people we love, the people who shape our beliefs, the people who keep us going when we're down and out, the people who give us a hand when we deserve it least. Reen as a character is a fascinating deep dive from the perspective of experiences and interpersonal dynamic. Reen to me is an incredibly likable person. He's the friend who will play Mario Party with you and not end your friendship with him. He'll beat you, but he'll be a gracious winner. He'll lose to you and give you respect when you deserve it. Perfect example of this weird, incomprehensible idea and tangent is especially his dynamic with Crow. Once the reveal drops, you know the one. How we find out about Crow and the clashes they fought all evoke similar shades of Naruto vs. Sasuke in the OG Naruto. Main differences, of course, of Trails of Cold Steel and Naruto being Cold Steel's lack of absurd amount of filler. Reen does not handle this well. Reen is heartbroken, disappointed, and just like the audience, he's asking Crow why. The reason why he did is smartly saved for the second game. Reen desperately asked Crow if everything he and Reen have been together was a lie, and Reen and Crow are brothers to the end, and you can see Crow in real time with the gears turning, studying himself, about to tell a lie and say, yes, it was all a lie. And Reen's reaction is perfectly that of a younger brother. Referring, of course, to the whole Bank of Reen's most expensive interest rates, because he thinks he can beat up his blood, but blood is on a different level at this point. The endings of Cold Steel 1 and 2 would not work if Reen was merely just a bunch of tropes on a page. Reen's relationships with other people would not work if he was just another Ayato from the Asterisk War. Despite him being an overglorified zombie, Reen himself shows that no, He can be more than the tropes assigned to him, and that's a huge plus for me. He's both a man's man and a ladies' man simultaneously. He's not some weak chicken shit main character self-insert that the Japanese tend to like to make. He's legitimately attracted to women. And while he's awkward sometimes, as all teenagers are, he does not have any discomfort when he's shown romantic affections by a woman. The best part about playing as Reed in the first place is the eventual journey of getting with Sarah Valentine. And in Cold Steel 2, Fee jumps right onto Reed. Clearly, she's closer than just friends or even a sister. Hell, in my opinion, my love for Fee and Fee's dynamic with Reed would not be so heartwarming and heart-fluttering if Reed was generic. Keep in mind the difference in audience between Crossbell and Cold Steel. In my opinion, Cold Steel 1 is more centered around the young adult genre, whereas Crossbell gives me more seinen vibe. There are still so many moments that still reverberate within me today with this game. Whether it be things like fighting Loa Erebonius or the Chancellor getting shot, it's still my third favorite twist out of the Cold Steel series. Well, technically all my favorite twists happen in Cold Steel. I do love and appreciate Crossbell, but the DG Colt twist and the Azor effect, as I'm calling it, don't work well for me on a personal level. Or more specifically, the DG Colt would work as a twist for me if not for the ludicrous ideas set by Trails to Azor. I know I'm ragging on Trails to Azor way too much, but after some thought, these are problems that are so drastic that they become why I relegated Trails to Azor back down to third rather than tie for second. But Cold Steel 1 had so many great things it establishes in its gameplay, set-piece fights, and storytelling dynamic that except for Chancellor Osborne, chances are that there is no plot armor. It's close to Game of Thrones level of ludicrous danger. Trails Kiseki as a series is not afraid to upend their audience's perception of the world. So, time for the most pedantic, annoying argument so far. I like the old Class 7 better. I know, considering how sexy, hot, and yummy Muse is, but work with me here. I spent more time with OG Class 7 than I do with new Class 7 when alone. In games like 4, you spend a lot of time with both teams together combined. In 2, though, Fee practically takes over with her narrative as a deuteragonist at minimum, co-opted main character at best. Fee jumped right off the cliff and right into our hearts and never fucking left. I didn't really care for Elliot, but so many friends and fans of mine love him, so I'm not necessarily going to judge. Alyssa is simultaneously both the most adorable, yet paradoxically frustrating, that she blows my complaints with Yuna out of the water, and that aggravation makes me remember Alyssa and ship her so hard with so many characters. At first, the Machias and Eustace dynamic was aggravating and frustrating, but as time went on, it was solid pieces of character development. Hell, Machias began to slowly respect Eustace as Machias saw how much effort Eustace puts in to be good representation of the nobility, making Machias develop some nuance. Emma is an interesting case, because she is memorable yet entirely unremarkable. As an arc, she has a fascinating one that's omnipresent yet always in the background. Her dynamic with Vita is great too. I love the fact that Vita gave her fashion tips. She ditched the fucking glasses, and the fact that her glasses were her way of not drawing attention, even though she's a 10 out of 10 knockout. Then seeing Emma finally discard that hesitation by saying, I don't need these anymore. And yet people consider the new Class 7 the best? Don't forget that Sarah Valentine is the better teacher than Rain, and is a great waifu. Getting a relationship with her is so damn charming. Laura's arc was fantastic as well, becoming the next Sandlot. Relationship between Gaius, Elliot, and Rain at the beginning was just fantastic. The sheer disdain for Milliam is enough for me to remember her. Toa is the most adorable pet ever, and I will fight literal wars to lay claim to her. The fact that we can be with her in 4 is so damn great. Let me be clear though, If you prefer the new Class 7, that's totally understandable, and is your absolute right, and on an objectivist level, I can see that. I do consider the new Class 7 to be similar to the Special Support section, and I believe your invocation of such to be valid. Muse, Ash, Altina, Kurt, and Yuna remind me of Lloyd, Randy, Tio, Ellie, if that is her real name. Yes, I'm bringing the meme back. And Noelle Beskirl and Wazi. The more I think about it, the more I can see both units being similar, and thus I can see why people find their views valid here. But my stance, for various reasons, is that I believe in the OG Class 7. Requiem of Blood and Iron, Phantasmal Blaze Plan, enough said. Sorry, when I said Phantasmal Blaze Plan, I meant Song of Requiem. You know what I mean. Phew. I went off on a major tangent, but now is the time to give appreciation to Crossbell. I'm a level with you. I don't see it, don't get it. If you don't understand what I'm referring to, it's that some people consider this their GOAT. I haven't touched Sky yet, and Referee and Nayata are around the corner, but I just don't see Two Azure as the best. Then again, my best is the most contentious take possible, so maybe I shouldn't be taken too seriously on what qualifies as the best. Look, it has a lot of wonderful aspects. Beating Azure and Nightmare was just as exhilarating, if not more so, than McBurn and Nightmare, and that's saying a lot. The reason being is mechanical. There was a lot of wiggle room in fights between McBurn and Osborne. We had the ability to have instant blocking of their moves, but unlike McBurn and Osborne, Azure had the ability to remove that protection. It's a brutal, several hours long slugfest, and sometimes Odyssey-esque battles are amazing to experience. Defeating Azure Demiurgos felt satisfying because you eventually learn his exploit to avoid mass AoE spells that'll likely end your battle then and there. Not to mention it has a lot of potential to vanish your entire team in the midnight hour of your battle for no explicable reason, meaning if the vanish skill succeeds, it's an immediate game over. Sure, there was panic with Big Burn. Sure, the intensity and excitement for Osborne was incredible, but the Azure Demiurgos is another level of danger entirely on Nightmare mode. Once again, gotta remind you all how much I love bosses on Nightmare modes. The sheer intensity of the challenge and viciousness gets me tingly. Imagine being in first person, facing off against Osborne in real time, while a massive purple and black lion appears behind him as he slowly, steadily, and menacingly marches towards you, whips his sword to the side. That is a sense of immersive danger that an Osborne fight brings. Now multiply that by 1,000. Imagine fighting all that physicality. Imagine the level of absurd quick thinking, adaptability, and the mindset of sheer micromanaging each turn, constantly making sure to be vigilant and make at least one character casting an art, because the cancellation of the art is a single target, and depending on the character and spread out, the singular attack does nearly nothing to you. But despite the danger, it is still better than what you'll learn the hard way, aka the AoE fuck-off laser that can nuke your entire party in one go. Did I mention that this hellish boss on Nightmare has 2 stages with obnoxious mob enemies? Then, after reaching roughly 20% or less health on the enemy, you fire out all your big S-cracked attack. Then you hope and pray you do enough damage to finish the job. And then it switches to cutscene mode, meaning you beat him. Azure Demiurgus is finally beaten. All the heinous crap that Maria Bell, Dieter, Arios, and Grimwood all set up, rendered to nothing as Lloyd, in probably my favorite moment of Lloyd's character arc, charges into an imploding mental state of a god, reaching a point of suicidal ideation, and like a madman, throws away any sense of self-preservation just to make sure to stay Kia. It was moments like this that made me hate the divertisement in 2 and a large part of Cold Steel 3 as a whole. Where was this Lloyd Banning? The Lloyd Banning's willing to go 1 step too far to protect and save what he loves, and he fights the law and the law lost. That is the Lloyd Bannings I believe it. The one moment so intense that in my opinion had shown that he had long surpassed Guy. All of his whinging about never being able to be like his older brother, never noticing his large strides and being better than Guy. And then as Kia is self-destructing, he charges forward. That, Lloyd Bannings, was the epitome, the living embodiment of the phrase, fear is an emotion, courage is a decision. Let me talk to you, because holy hell, this sort of semi-insane Lloyd is the Lloyd I love as a character. Yeah, sure, Rain has his strengths and might do the same in his position, but to see this Lloyd, this often we have a long way to go Lloyd, pulling off the most insane badass Giga Lloyd move imaginable. And because he had this moment of brilliant insanity and determination that made the final straw of me putting this third instead of possibly lower. Because as the madness unfolds, when a situation beyond your grasp, beyond your strength, beyond your control arrives, what do? Well, what Lloyd did was never give in, never gave up, and because he went beyond his limits, he saved Kia, and even got a nice bonus saying hi to his brother in yet another heartwarming moment. Figurative passing of the torch, with one that a lot of us here in real life wish to hear from our role models and heroes. Give 'em hell, Lloyd Banning. Fuck me, sideways, shove a spicy Italian hoagie down my throat, because holy hell, that moment was awesome. In any other series, this would in fact be the best story imaginable, any mechanics best imaginable, but we don't live in that other theoretical other series. We live in the best Kiseki reality imaginable. 2 games that follow that are superior in their own right. These 2 games being why I can't see Azure as the best, because despite Azure's vast strengths, its weaknesses and flaws are also vast. The next 2 games in my opinion do a better job of the old adage, hide the negatives, accentuate the positives, by Paul Heyman. Trails of Cold Steel 4. Yeah, I know I'm going to get conversations going with these last 2, but bear with me. Some of the set pieces in this game are phenomenal. All the twists in 4, to see Dreikel's desires and ambitions finally gets revealed, and what he has wanted to actually do, but ultimately in a part of character growth, while also fueling absurd hype, despite admitting he could be wrong, and then the music hit. And oh my god, this boss fight, for what his fight and McBurn's fight lack in convoluted and absurd difficulty, make up for in sheer presentation. While I was hyped for the McBurn fight for its fearful danger, I had a general strategy for his nightmare mode counterpart. But man, when seeing the Osborne fight, my first reaction is, this is cinema. And that's really what this battle truly is. McBurn was gamey and disturbing in sheer intensity, but thematically had next to no stakes to it. McBurn's entire motivation is, the world's going to die anyways. I may as well go full demonic power and recover the memories, lols. While we as a group were fighting McBurn with all we got, McBurn wasn't really affected by the battle. But Osborne, on the other hand, is cinema within gameplay. Unlike the McBurn fight, the fight with Osborne is a fight of pageantry that gives love and respect to both sides, because they themselves each believe they are fighting for what's right. Osborne's fight is a wank fest between both sides, and boy oh boy is this fight glorious. People like to say McBurn's fight overshadowed Osborne, and quite frankly, I don't agree with that sentiment. I think that in order to overshadow the Osborne fight, you must do similar things to it, but better. Don't get me wrong, I do love the McBurn fight, and oh my god is it incredible and intense in nightmare mode. But there's just something else in said Osborne fight. The way it's designed and presented is absurd. Just know something about its structure. Azure Demiurgus is a 2-stage boss. 3 if you wish to be pedantic and add Mario Bell. The Osborne fight, if you count the Divine Knight battle, is a 4-stage boss battle. No, really. Unlike the McBurn fight, you fight Osborn in 3 waves. Then you often use the primordial flame in the fight against Osborn and Ishmelga. Ishmelga as the final boss side, the level of presentation, pageantry, and just downright presence. Osborn has always been the strongest man, even in Trails to Azure. Before you know everything Osborn has to do and has done, literally terrifies and freezes up the special support section just when discussing ideology. And for sheer greater irony is that after the fact, after the conversation, the guard in charge of defending Osborn's room and door says, "Be lucky he was in a good mood." What? Then, on top of that, both intelligence agencies of both Calvard and Erebonia mentioned that Osborn factors his own assassination in his plans. And he does so because he knows he can't be killed. Literally leading to everyone calling Osborn a monster. And by that, I mean literally fucking everyone. Now imagine 8 or 9 games dedicated to Osborn as the phony villain. All this power, all this crescendo. 8 or 9 games leading to the fight between Class 7, New and Old, Crossbell, and Sky versus just Osborn. And when we defeat him, he is still standing. I will never agree with people when they say Osborn gets overshadowed by McBurn. The one weakness of 4 is Ishmelga. But instead of overly negative, my views are mixed. It was a privilege and joy to finish off Ishmelga. Hell, even the rivalries as a concept is freaking awesome. Everything in 4, weaknesses and strengths, create this ludicrous crescendo and conclusion. But there is one game, despite everything I said in 4, that surpasses 4. And funny enough, Cold Steel 4 agrees with me. Trails of Cold Steel 2. Now, I know this is where things can get testy and toxic, but please work with me here. What sets Cold Steel 2 from 4 is its presentation. Keep in mind that Cold Steel 4 actually has a lot of similar elements to Cold Steel 2. So many aspects that are borrowed from 2 that it is silly. Shrines, scripted and fragmented memories, and its presentation, just as a few examples. So on and so forth. But the theme about Cold Steel 2 that I love the most is the theme of a simple concept. Closure. Closure of the Civil War. Closure of the arc against Crow. Closure of trying to return Sasuke to the Leaf Village. I mean, trying to return Crow to Class 7 where he rightfully belongs. And for a brief, temporary moment, Crow returns to the side of Class 7. But then this happens. To dangle in front of us a peaceful resolution we love, only to remind us that reality is ever less forgiving. Closure for the Alisa arc, the co-optation of 2 with Fee's character arc, plus everything that makes me gush about Fee, previously mentioned, the Civil War that was built on one specific noble's insecurities, and family legacy, aka Duke Cayenne, brought to a cinematic close, marching ever so endlessly. Closure for old Class 7 school day. A new future for old Class 7 as they become adults and have to live their lives in accordance to their capabilities in society. Yeah, the epilogue did make me tear up a bit, but the ending after that made me tear up more. The only problem I really truly have with 2 is the divertisement, but here's a key paradigm shift of where things change. Before I played Crossbell, I had no idea who Risha was, and I was only barely cognizant of who Lloyd was. And what initially offended me by it was that I was playing as Lloyd, not Rain, who at the time was my favorite protagonist, and to be quite frank, still is for now. I really hate when they randomly change the protag that you're playing as and just throw a new guy fighting your favorite protagonist. I can't wait to play Sky and learn about Kevin. He is a favorite of a lot of people, and from tidbits I've seen from Devil Leon's stream, I can see why. Plus the nun is hot and sexy. Rias, I believe her name is. But back on track, what bothers me now about the divertisement is that it does Crossbell, Lloyd, and Risha dirty. I think the main problem has always been structural, but at every other level, both mechanically, whose ideas Cold Steel 4 pilfers off, this is a game whose core idea centers around aspects of life we do all have to deal with, whether it's losing your father, your inspiration, or all of it leading to a path you never expected to end up on in the first place, such as me going into YouTube. YouTubing was never originally planned for me. I intended to solely be an author, but starting YouTube sent my path on an entirely different direction. What makes this poignant is that eventually life moves on and forces you to move on with it. So if your life is going to change radically, wouldn't you want closure? Anyways, thank you for watching this. I am hyped for Reverie. I've had a wild ride so far by platinuming Crossbell and Goldsteel via PSN, which you can find me at dead4346. Yes, all capitals. And you will find my eventual Sky playthroughs on Steam under my usual name of OneManCast. Feel free to do the usual YouTube recommended things. If you like this video and want me to continue doing what I do have a Patreon, but my tiers are trash, so don't take the ranks too seriously. It's mostly just a way for me to live life a bit more comfortably while I journey through all these crazy, wonderful series along the way. Of course, any form of payment is appreciated but not required. Do not take the tiers of my Patreon seriously. I must reiterate, I'm waiting for input as to fix it to be more reasonable and in line with being a YouTuber rather than an author. But if you want to see some written works, check out my Pixiv. I have a fan fiction for Neptunia in one area, and an original work named Sky Omen in another one. Trails is by far one of the most enjoyable game franchises to experience. I can only hope that despite the chat restrictions I must place in my live streams, you can still watch and enjoy alongside my friends with my journey around the Trail series. Reverie hype is coming. Sky and Atelier Marie soon after. Yes, by the way, Reverie will be paused once Marie Remake comes out, but I will switch back out to Reverie eventually once Marie Remake is either platinumed or dropped. I may do whatever the F I want channel. I'll occasionally pop out a review, retrospective, rankings, a tier list, etc., but I mostly do live streams. While I love writing for reviews, editing is another matter. So ideally, I'd like to go off the cuff instead and review based on memory on streams instead, or in my comment sections or posts, rather than edited reviews. Definitely let me know if you want more of this, because I spent a lot of time writing this out and editing all the footage and downloading all the footage. Holy crap, for this series. Love for this YouTube business. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, to stay inspired, that my will is absolute, and that this is still my era. The unrivaled era.